Hi folks, Kirby Obsidian here. As we know, politics can be such an ugly, lying enterprise. One of the worst tactics, and we see it all the time, is proclaiming an intention that's so noble and pure that no one can stand against it, but then using that stated intention to cover for a selfish, immoral, or anti-democratic intention, using one positive policy or achievement to cover for an evil one. This can force citizens into a dilemma of supporting a positive result that's backed by all the wrong reasons. And by wrong reasons, I mean by the wrong methods, by the wrong agents, or with the wrong intentions. I find this a really hard question, and I don't think there's any automatic right way to approach these situations. I think it's the kind of dilemma that can't be answered by formula. We need to examine each case for what it is, with all the particular factors that are in play. So let's look at a current concrete example. It's a commendable goal for a country to be in control of its borders, right? We all know this. For immigrants to enter the country by means that are clear and legal, right? The loss of this control became a problem in the U.S. as the numbers of immigrants coming through the southern border became unmanageable, and they overwhelmed both the communities along the almost 2,000-mile border, and they overwhelm the agencies that have to manage the influx. And so, to some extent, this became a problem of resources and funding to manage the influx. So the goal itself, to manage the border and immigration across the border, was commendable. And Trump has either achieved that goal or he's come closer to it, brought the U.S. closer to it than we've been in a long time. But he's achieved this goal by deporting huge numbers of people. And in the process, he's deported a lot of people who did follow the legal process for entering the country. He's violated the rights of many of those illegals, subjecting them to brutality, denying due process, sometimes sending them to countries where they will intentionally or unintentionally be subjected to further abuses. It's as though the crime of being in the country made them fair game for any type of abuse. But beyond that, he's also arrested, deported, brutalized, and otherwise violated the rights of many U.S. citizens who are supposed to be protected by the laws. 2 people that we know of have been murdered, and these murders have been basically covered up and defended. Now, aside from all this, we also have the collateral effects of families being broken up, communities terrorized, and businesses being hurt by the threats to their workers. These are all examples of the wrong means I spoke of, which do more harm than the original problems that they're supposed to be solving. Trump turned what was largely a management problem into a problem of rampant, heinous criminality, but that part was never real. It was fabricated. Of course, by cherry picking, isolated incidents of murder and rape by illegal immigrants have been highly publicized and politicized, but they distort the reality that illegal immigrants are substantially more law-abiding than native-born Americans. Saying otherwise is like saying that air travel is dangerous and ought to be banned based on the occasional plane crash that leads the nightly news. It's been demonstrated over and over again that the vast number of detainees and deportees are guilty of no crimes, aside from just being in the country, more serious than traffic violations. Now, Trump has further politicized the matter by tying immigration to his stolen election hoax, claiming that illegals are purposely brought into the country to vote for Democrats. This, too, has been disproven, but it will certainly be used in November as an excuse for Trump to police the election that he knows is going to severely limit his power. Trump obviously knows all this. So, given that the crime problem is a lie and the illegal voting is a lie, we have to look more closely for his true intentions. And I agree with many others that his intention is to intimidate his critics, to intimidate those communities that vote against him with a show of brutal force. The brutality and random violence of ICE, it isn't just accidental, and it isn't just the result of poor training. It's intentional. So while a worthwhile objective has been achieved, or neared anyway, it's been achieved by atrocious means and with anti-democratic and authoritarian intentions, which make the entire enterprise much worse than the problems that they're supposed to be addressing. One of the many ways that common folk wisdom refers to such solutions is throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And when you think about that metaphor, it's about as horrific as it could be. And I even go a step further. I'll call it like drowning the baby in the bathwater. This is the dishonesty and deception behind Trump's gambit during his State of the Union address, in which he asked legislators to stand if they believed that the first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. The Democrats refused to stand. That's because they were showing their opposition to Trump's means and to his true intentions. This is one aspect of the political game that we've all been forced to play. Now, how does the current attack on Iran look through a similar lens? Now, Iran has a regime that severely limits the rights of its people. It's a regime that sponsors terrorism in the region. And in just the last months, many thousands of its citizens were killed while protesting the regime. And of course, it's reasonable that most other countries in the world don't want to see Iran with a nuclear arsenal. So it seems absolutely justified to me and to almost all commentators who I've heard of to be in favor of regime change for Iran. But how about the means and the agents and the intentions of this regime change and of this current attack? Is this really about keeping Iran from developing a nuclear arsenal? Trump insisted just months ago that Iran's nuclear projects had been completely wiped out from last year's missile strikes. Now, though Trump has demonstrated his propensity to lie about all his achievements, at least some experts are saying that Iran is nowhere near achieving its goal of having a nuclear arsenal. In addition, though they weren't looking very promising, there were negotiations taking place when this attack took place. There's been no consultation with Congress, which holds the power to declare and to fund wars. One of the things that this means is that there's been no planning that's known of outside of the core of the administration to ensure that this war leads to a desirable outcome. Experts on international law are saying that this is an illegal attack because neither the U.S. nor Israel was at imminent risk from Iran. Now, Iran, of course, is also retaliating, not effectively so far, but it's possible that a wider and prolonged conflict is going to be triggered by this. At this point, though much of the leadership of Iran has been killed, it isn't apparent that regime change has or will be achieved. So, is celebration in order? Well, I'm not ready to celebrate nor to congratulate. I have a deep hope that some form of liberation will come to the people of Iran. But there's at least some doubt as to whether that will be the result of all of this. Now, even if liberation is achieved, will it result in a regime that's more positively disposed towards the U.S. and toward Israel? It could be, and it could be otherwise. Those inside Iran who want regime change, they may share the current regime's attitude about the U.S. It can't be assumed that they'll go along with the maxim, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I imagine that to Trump, the political leanings of the next regime will matter more than any liberation of its population. After all, he doesn't appear to be bothered by the fact that after abducting Maduro, the head of Venezuela, the regime that was left in place remains as repressive as it was while Maduro was in power. What's changed is that the regime has been intimidated into subservience to the U.S. and has relinquished control of its oil. If the goal is to force a pro-U.S., pro-Israeli government into power in Iran, that might be simply repeating a mistake of the past, when the U.S. propped up the government of the Shah of Iran, which was overthrown in 1979, leading to the current government that is so detested and is so virulently anti-U.S. Unfortunately, the U.S. has a long history of supporting oppressive and unpopular regimes, which has led to the success of revolutions to overturn those regimes and then to generate intense anti-U.S. sentiment in the population and in the government that follows. Now, if the ultimate goal then is to replace a regime that's anti-U.S. with one that's pro-U.S., regardless of whether that regime is democratic and regardless of whether it offers its citizens rights, then that exposes any altruistic lie about serving the good people of Iran. Is this war really about gaining control of the country's resources? If so, then it's simply a case of imperialism or piracy, and it has to be condemned. Now, I have no evidence that this is the case, but Trump's record suggests to me that his motives are much more selfish than they are altruistic. And finally, another theory is that this war is serving as a distraction and deflection from the Epstein files, which continue to haunt Trump and his administration. So much remains to be seen, and much remains to be learned. But for myself, however evil the current Iranian regime is, I can't feel supportive of the attack that's taking place. There's too much wrong with the process and with the timing, and too much to suspect about the motives for me to support a president who is clearly determined to undermine democracy and undermine the rule of law in his own country. Bye for now.